Bobby in New York.
Hello?
Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm doing well. It's good to hear from you guys. I've been listening to your show a lot for the past year, and I really enjoy a lot of the topics that you talk about, and you guys have definitely helped me expand my critical thinking over the past year.
Oh, great! Glad to hear it.
Yeah. So what I wanted to talk to you about today is that why I believe in an afterlife, and I guess that you can be an atheist and still believe in an afterlife.
You can.
Yes.
I kind of doubt that you can be terribly skeptical and believe in an afterlife unless you've got some evidence for it. So go ahead.
Well, you guys have probably heard of all the arguments before, so it's probably nothing new. But the idea is that it's like Rene Descartes' argument that if you wake up one day and you go to your bathroom mirror and you don't see any reflection, and you look down and there's no body there, but you know that you're there, and it's can you imagine that happening? Not actually happening, but just in a fantasy world, imagine it happening. And just because you can imagine that, that means that the mind and the body are two separate things. Because you can't imagine a world where, that table that you're sitting at now is there but isn't there at the same time. But you can imagine a world where you exist, yourself is there, but your body isn't. So that means that the death of the body doesn't necessarily mean the death of the mind.
I can imagine a lot of stuff that isn't true.
Yeah.
I mean,
I can imagine I'm a cyborg.
Right.
But
I got a metal electronic brain, but I'm not.
yeah.
Wait, what?
But I'm not one. I mean, as far as we know, minds need a medium to exist in.
Yeah, that's a good point, because it was one of the things that I was reading about was that you're really just deceiving yourself. You really can't imagine the two being the same thing. You just kind of...
No, I totally can.
Yeah, even if you could totally imagine that happening. Even if I could imagine that Russell has an exact twin, he doesn't.
Right.
As far as you know.
Right, yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, that was just an interesting thought that I wanted to share with you guys.
So in summary, you thought there was an afterlife because you believe that mind and body are two separate things.
Well, I mean, it's a possibility that I just thought it was a possibility that that the self, because you can imagine them being two separate things, that the death of one or the ending of one doesn't mean that the other is necessarily attached to it, that it doesn't have to be the same thing.
Well, I'd like to believe that, but all the actual physical evidence that we have is that when somebody's brain dies, they die. I mean, there aren't any examples we've seen of just a mind floating around without something to hold it in.
Yeah.
So it seems like mind is an emergent property of physical stuff.
A lot of the things that we know about how the brain works actually comes from people with brain damage in certain parts of their brain, and we don't say, well, if the back of your brain is damaged, you lose a lot of the ability to see, and that's just a part.
Yeah, you're right. That's a good point. I mean, I knew it was kind of a shaky thing. I kind of just wanted to hear someone else's opinion on it.
Yeah,
it's tempting. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason so many people believe in the afterlife, because nobody wants to think they're going to die.
Yeah, it would be nice. It would be nice to not die.
Yeah.
It sure
and
would.
I would think that I was thinking that if a proof for an afterlife would be sort of more solid than just kind of a mind game. But yeah,
not necessarily. I mean, you can do mind games, but the last time I was on the show, I did a mind game, which was kind of, well, if a soul existed and there was dualism, what would you expect to see? And the kind of thing that you would expect to see would be, you would not have a brain, because what's the point of having a brain? You would just kind of puppet each limb individually, And the changes maybe in your muscles would just come from nowhere. There wouldn't be any chemically traceable link to anything because you would just be puppeting these things. Or if it was somehow the brain was some kind of conduit, you would see some kind of a sensory organ and some kind of communicating organ like you would with the ear when you hear things. But there's no such structure in the brain or chemical in the brain. It's just the brain. Yeah,
that's a good point. And to go back on what you said before, is when you were talking about like brain damage, relegating the functions of the body. It's like one of the things that I heard Sam Harris say is that like if you damage more parts of the brain, the more you damage, the more it gets impaired. But people think that if you damage the entire thing, then you can just be sort of reassembled and just recognize grandma and all that kind of stuff.
Right. And like, I mean, you think about somebody who's so brain damaged that they've lost a bunch of their memories. Is there a soul out there that has perfect recall of every memory that they seem to have lost, but they can't seem to send it to the body, so the body is just acting all confused? And I guess then in what sense is the body really connected to that mind?
Yeah. So, I mean, it was just an interesting idea that I thought I should talk to you guys about.
All right. Well, read up on cognitive science. I think you would find it really interesting.
And maybe do some coming to grips with death.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is terrible, terrible thing.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.